My name is Ashley Hamilton. I am the founder and the CEO of Prism Lacquers. Prism Lacquers is the beauty brand for a better world. We essentially are shaking up the beauty industry by combining beauty with activism, with purpose, with a greater sense of wanting to make a difference in the world. We donate 10% of our sales to an organization that's making a difference in the topic at hand. For spring, we really are looking into colors that pop. We want colors that reflect the beauty of Mother Earth. We are very conscious about our packaging because we ship a lot of orders. We wanted to make sure that we invested in biodegradable shipping materials. As people are purchasing, they can feel good about their purchase, not just because they're making a difference, but because they're also not contributing to the landfills. I've had the opportunity to interview some experts in the field. This is something that's so personal to me. It's very near and dear to my heart. Prism seeks to look at these issues, create a dialogue about them, and show people this is what you can do to help. This is what you can do to play a role. Our spring and summer line is about climate change, environmentalism, environmental justice specifically.
I'm Jasmine Sanders, Executive Director of Our Climate.
It's people of color who are being affected the most by climate change and all of its impacts.
I'm Toby Shannon, a final semester candidate for my MBA and MPA at Presidio Graduate School. The entire school curriculum is built around sustainability and social justice.
I went to Belize to study abroad for one summer. I was free diving on a coral reef, and it was as if God was saying to me, this is what you need to do. So I went back to my advisor, and I told her, I was like, had a great summer abroad. I want to go get my master's in marine biology, and I want to leave the United States. I had always been the adventurous, going to several camps. They picked me up from one, and I'd be like, all right, let me go to the next one. I wanted to meet all different people. I was always fascinated with different cultures and how they were impacted in their day-to-day lives.
I was like the environmental club lead, in high school. I attended Spelman College and was able to learn a little bit more just from the Atlanta community and different communities that I was a part of. And even through my major of international studies, I was able to study abroad. And when you talk about like the Paris Accords or things of that nature that are really unilateral across the world, that's the type of thing that I'm really interested in pushing forward and making sure that especially our businesses in the United States and the ways that they're carrying out their business and measuring their emissions and things of that nature is really important to me.
Climate change, it refers to the increasing changes in the measures of climate over a long period of time. This includes precipitation, temperature, and wind patterns. It's the threat that we now all know about, yet we're constantly learning more about each and every day, simply because the intensity of it is escalating.
When people talk about climate change, they're usually talking about the weather shifts that are happening within our atmosphere, that are causing different weather patterns that aren't normal necessarily. We understand what natural disasters are, but they're coming in an influx, unfortunately. It's coming more rapidly now. And so I think that when people talk about climate change, that's what they're talking about. And that's due to the fact that businesses and people, just human beings and animals, quite honestly, depending on how they're farmed and how we're consuming them, just our consumption in general of our resources are giving off harmful emissions into our atmosphere. And so it's leading to a deterioration within our ecosystem, and especially when you talk about greenhouse gases.
We've all heard of the New Deal. When that was created in 1933, there were a series of programs, public work projects, financial reforms, and regulations that were enacted to build up America's infrastructure. It was not created to benefit all people. It caused people of color to be pushed instead into urban housing projects, while housing was provided more for white middle-class, lower middle-class families. And this was a policy known as redlining. When you talk about redlining, People are still impacted by those redlined districts to this day, and that these environmental injustices are not one-offs. They're things that are happening, decades ago to 2 generations before us, and it's trickling down. Here in Washington, D.C., 1 out of 3 kids suffer from asthma due to bad environmental air quality. The majority of those kids are kids of color, just because of where their house is situated. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and the meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of your race, your color, your national origin, or your income, with respect to the development, the implementation, and the enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. People are writing letters to their city council members, speaking up about this, bringing it to the attention of the president or CEO of these companies, rather than the manager who is on site. To my knowledge, there has not, specifically in Louisiana, I'll say that, there has not been any reparations or accountability in this regard.
It's more so advocating for those who are most affected by that climate change, which is not very often talked about or is just now being shown a light on. I think that for a number of years, especially when you talk about the history of environmentalism and sustainability in the United States, scientists have been working on this for a while and trying to tell politicians and different leaders of the country that this is happening. But especially since the 70s, there hasn't been a lot of light shown on the ways that it affects our most vulnerable population. A lot of things now about intersectional environmentalism and what that looks like. It's really important to make sure that we're addressing climate change and addressing the adverse effects it has on people, and especially vulnerable communities, because they're the ones who are being hit the most, but they have, unfortunately, the least amount of power in terms of decision making when it comes to putting regulations on emissions, having politicians pass policies or sanctions so that companies aren't allowed to dump in different places or allowed to place buildings or even factories or different things like that, especially communities of color.
I have more hope than ever before on real climate action happening in the United States and around the world. This will be the first time that climate change is one of the top 4 priorities of an administration. We are establishing a new climate office in the White House, and this is showing initiative. This is showing that this actually is a priority. Thrive Agenda, Environmental Justice for All Act, Energy and Resilient Communities Act. All of these were introduced, sponsored by Madam Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. Major climate champions in the White House: Gina McCarthy, a Black woman leading Council on Environmental Quality. You're going to have a Black man leading the EPA. You're going to have an Indigenous woman leading the Interior Department. This is mind-blowing of how this administration is actually going to represent.
I'm happy that the pandemic has shown a light on a lot of Indigenous and Black leaders, men and women and non-binary people who have been doing this work. It's really important to make sure that this work is as diverse as the people it affects, really uplift their voices and understanding that they have the answers within their communities already, but we need to listen to them. Being a Black woman in this space, it's, at first it was pretty lonely in terms of me trying to figure out, where can I find mentors? Where can I find, other thought leaders and thought partners? But as I've grown more in the space thus far, it's been really great to hear from a lot of Black and Indigenous leaders who are, leading this work in their own way. So you think of the Leah Thomases, and you think of other people who are working even in venture capital to invest in climate tech and agricultural tech and things of that nature.
Coming from Flint, Michigan, we had one of the worst water crises that this country has ever seen. I knew that it was part of a bigger issue that the entire planet is facing.